The thing about legends is that they always start somewhere small, a whisper in a bar, a story told to a child, a old soldier's drunken ramble that nobody really believes. I heard the first whisper about the Black Ship when I was stationed on Kepler 47c, a backwater mining colony at the edge of human space. Back then, I was just a logistics officer, shuffling paperwork and making sure the water recyclers didn't break down. My biggest concern was whether the supply freighter would arrive on time with the coffee shipment. That was before. That was before I learned that the universe is much older and much stranger than any of us ever imagined. The day it all started, I remember because of the heat. Kepler 47c was a desert world, all red sand and brutal suns, two of them hanging in the sky like angry eyes. The temperature rarely dropped below 40 degrees Celsius during the day, and the nights weren't much better. I was standing in the main concourse of the colony's central hub, waiting for a data transfer to complete. The hub was a sprawling structure of prefab metal and recycled plastic, the kind of place that smelled like sweat, recycled air, and desperation. Miners shuffled past me, their faces covered in red dust, their eyes empty. They worked 12-hour shifts in the silica mines, digging up minerals that would fuel the Empire's war machine. The Empire, the galactic empire of 1,000 worlds, that was what they called themselves. A vast civilization of aliens stretching across 3 spiral arms with technology so advanced it looked like magic to human eyes. They'd found us about 80 years ago, a primitive species still fighting over borders and resources, and they'd done what empires always do. They'd conquered us, but they hadn't exterminated us. No, that would have been too clean. Instead, they'd absorbed us, integrated us into their vast bureaucracy, used us as labor for the dirty jobs nobody else wanted. We became the janitors of the galaxy, the miners, the factory workers. The humans who could survive almost anywhere, who could work in conditions that would kill other species, who just kept going no matter what. We were useful, that was our saving grace. And our curse. The data transfer was taking forever. The hub's ancient computers were wheezing like old men, struggling to process the incoming information from the orbital station above. I leaned against a pillar, watching the crowd. The colony had about 50,000 inhabitants, mostly human, with a scattering of other species. A pair of Cathari traders haggled with a merchant over the price of water filters. A group of Rigelian soldiers marched past, their blue skin gleaming under the harsh lights, their faces hidden behind breathing masks. They didn't look at us. We were beneath their notice. We were just the humans, the expendable ones. A child ran past me, laughing, chasing a ball that had escaped her grasp. She was maybe 6 years old, her hair a tangled mess of brown curls, her clothes stained with red dust. She looked happy, happy despite everything. I remembered being that young. I remembered when I still believed that the universe was a place of wonder. I smiled at her as she passed. She smiled back, a gap-toothed grin before disappearing into the crowd. That was the last time I saw her smile. The first sign that something was wrong came from the orbital station. The station was called Waystation 7, a massive ring of metal and glass that served as the system's primary spaceport. It was where the freighters docked, where the Imperial officials conducted their business, where the real power was concentrated. I was still waiting for my data transfer when the lights flickered, just once, a brief stutter that made everyone pause. Power fluctuation, someone muttered, probably just a surge. But I could see it in the faces of the Imperial soldiers. They'd stopped marching. They were looking at their wrist comms, their expressions hidden behind their masks but their body language screaming tension. Then the alarm started. Not the normal alarms, the ones that signaled a hull breach or a radiation leak. This was something else, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through the very bones of the colony. Everyone stopped moving. Even the miners, the ones who seemed to have given up on caring about anything, Even they stopped. "What the hell?" someone said. And then the sky turned black. Not black like night. Not black like a cloud passing over the suns. Black like the universe had been erased. Like someone had taken a giant eraser and wiped away everything above the horizon. I ran outside. Everyone did. We poured out of the hub, thousands of us, staring up at the sky in confusion and fear. The two suns were still there. I could see them faintly, like distant candles through thick smoke. But the rest of the sky was gone. The stars, the orbital station, the distant nebula that had always hung on the horizon like a painting. All gone. "What is that?" someone screamed. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was struggling to process what I was seeing. It was like looking at a hole in reality itself, a void so absolute that it seemed to swallow light itself. And then I saw it. Emerging from that void, like a shark rising from deep water, came the ship. It was massive. No, that's not the right word. It was impossible. It stretched across the sky from horizon to horizon, a shape so vast that my brain couldn't comprehend it at first. I thought it was a trick of the light, a hallucination born from the heat. But it was real. It was black, the blackest black I'd ever seen, like someone had ripped a piece of the void itself and given it form. It had no markings, no lights, no engines that I could see. It was smooth, seamless, like a giant obsidian blade hanging in the sky. And it was moving, slowly, deliberately, heading straight for the colony. "It's a ship," I whispered. "It's a goddamn ship." The Imperial soldiers were in chaos. They were running, screaming into their comms, trying to raise Way Station 7, but there was no response. The station was gone, consumed by the void that the ship had brought with it. "What do we do?" someone asked me. A woman, a miner, her face pale beneath the red dust. "What do we do?" I didn't know. I'd never known. I was just a logistics officer, a paper pusher. I wasn't trained for this. But the ship was getting closer, and I could feel it now, a presence, a weight in the air. It wasn't just a ship, it was something else, something alive. The first attack came from the planet's surface. A group of Imperial soldiers had managed to get their anti-ship batteries operational. They were ground-based weapons, designed to defend against pirate raids and rogue asteroids. They fired at the black ship with everything they had. The missiles streaked toward the ship, leaving trails of fire in the dark sky. They impacted against its surface and... nothing, they didn't even leave a mark. They just vanished, absorbed into the blackness like water into sand. The soldiers kept firing. They couldn't stop. I understood that. It was the only thing they knew how to do, the only thing that made sense in a universe that had suddenly stopped making sense. The black ship didn't respond. It didn't fire back, didn't send out fighter craft, didn't do anything. It just kept descending slowly, relentlessly, until it blotted out both suns and we were plunged into an unnatural twilight. Then the ground shook. I fell along with everyone else. The ground beneath our feet was trembling, cracking, splitting apart. The mining tunnels below the colony were collapsing. I could hear the screams of the miners who were trapped underground, could see the buildings around me starting to crumble. And in the middle of all that chaos, I saw the girl again. The one with the brown curls. She was crying, clutching a piece of metal that might have been part of a cargo container, trying to find somewhere to hide. I ran toward her. I don't know why. I was terrified just like everyone else. But something in me, some stupid human instinct, made me run toward the sound of a child crying. I reached her just as another tremor hit. We both fell, sliding across the broken ground. I grabbed her, pulled her close, tried to shield her with my body. "It's okay," I said. "It's okay, I've got you." She was crying, her little body shaking. "What's happening?" she asked. "Why is the sky broken?" I didn't have an answer. I didn't have any answers. But then I looked up, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. The black ship was hovering directly above us, close enough that I could see the texture of its surface. It wasn't smooth like I'd thought. Up close, I could see that it was covered in patterns, intricate geometric shapes that seemed to shift and change as I watched them. They were beautiful. In a terrible kind of way, beautiful and wrong. And then it spoke. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It wasn't a sound, not really. It was more like a thought that wasn't mine, an idea that forced its way into my brain. You are the one. I blinked. The girl was still crying in my arms, but she'd stopped struggling. She was staring up at the ship with wide eyes, her mouth open in a silent scream. You are the one who will carry the message. What message? I asked. I didn't know why I was talking to it. It was insane. The whole situation was insane. The message of what is coming. The ship pulsed with light. Not a beam, not a flash, but a wave of deep crimson that rolled across its surface like a heartbeat. The darkness is not the end. It is the beginning. And then it was gone. Just like that. One moment it was there, blotting out the sky, and the next moment it was gone. The void it had brought with it vanished, and the sky was normal again. The two suns blazed down, and the stars twinkled, and Waystation 7 was hanging in orbit like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. I was holding a crying child in my arms, standing in the middle of a ruined colony, surrounded by the dead and the dying. The Imperial soldiers were everywhere, trying to restore order, trying to figure out what had just happened. They didn't look at me. They didn't see me. I was just another human, just another insignificant piece of their vast machine. But I knew that something had changed. I stood up, still holding the girl. She'd stopped crying, but she was trembling, her small hands clutching my shirt. Who are you? She asked. What do we do now? I looked around at the destruction. The colony was in ruins. Hundreds, maybe thousands, were dead. The rest were in shock, wandering aimlessly, trying to make sense of the senseless. And I knew in that moment that nothing would ever be the same again. I'm nobody, I told her, just a paper pusher, but I think we need to tell people what happened here. Will they believe us? I looked up at the sky, at the distant stars that were just starting to reappear. Somewhere out there, that black ship was still traveling. Somewhere out there, it was going to do this again. And again, and again. I don't know, I said, but we have to try. Part 2, the Empire's response. The Galactic Empire doesn't move quickly. It can't. When you control 1,000 worlds spread across 3 spiral arms, everything takes time. Messages have to travel through jump gates, ships have to be mobilized, decisions have to be made by committees that are more concerned with protocol than with urgency. In the weeks after the attack on Kepler 47c, I learned more about the Empire's bureaucracy than I ever wanted to know. I was brought to the Imperial capital for debriefing. That was what they called it anyway. In reality, it was more like an interrogation. They wanted to know what I'd seen, what the black ship had said to me, why I'd survived when so many others had died. I told them everything. I told them about the void, the ship, the voice in my head. I told them about the girl, about the crimson pulse, about the message that had been burned into my brain. They didn't believe me. Of course they didn't. They were Imperial officials, creatures of logic and data. They couldn't accept the idea of a ship that came from nowhere, that destroyed an entire orbital station and half a colony, that spoke directly to a human and then vanished without a trace. This is nonsense, one of them said. He was a Cathari, tall and slender, with the kind of voice that suggested he'd never done any real work in his life. The human is clearly suffering from trauma. The attack was probably a rogue asteroid or some kind of natural phenomenon. It wasn't an asteroid, I said. I saw it, I spoke to it. You spoke to it, another official, a Vrtan this time, with 3 eyes that blinked in different patterns. And what did it say to you? I told them. I repeated the words that had been burned into my brain, the ones that had been echoing in my head since that terrible day. The darkness is not the end, it is the beginning. They looked at each other. They didn't believe me. I could see it in their faces, or whatever passed for faces among their species. Clearly the result of psychological trauma, the Cathari said. The human mind is fragile. We've seen this before in other species. But that will be all, he said, cutting me off. We'll have a medical team examine you. And that was it. They dismissed me like I was nothing, like the whole thing had been a hallucination. They didn't want to hear the truth. They didn't want to believe that there was something out there, something that even their vaunted empire couldn't control. But I knew, and soon others would know too. The first news reports about the attack came out a month later. They were heavily censored, of course. The empire controlled the media on all its worlds, and they didn't want panic spreading. The official story was that a mining accident had caused a catastrophic failure in Kepler-47c's underground tunnels, leading to surface collapse and the destruction of Waystation 7. A mining accident, like we wouldn't notice that the sky had turned black, like we wouldn't remember the ship. I was still in the capital, undergoing medical and psychological evaluation. They'd put me in a small room with white walls and a bed that was too soft. I had guards outside my door, not to keep me in, but to keep others out. The Empire didn't want me talking to anyone. But I found ways. The capital was a massive city planet, all gleaming towers and advanced technology. It was the seat of the Empire's power, the place where all the important decisions were made. And like any city, it had its underbelly. Its bars, its dark corners, its places where people went to talk about things they weren't supposed to talk about. I found one of those places about 2 months into my captivity. A small bar in the lower levels, run by a human who'd been there for decades. The bar was called The Lost Cause, and it was exactly the kind of place I needed. I slipped out of my room at night when the guards were changing shifts. I'd learned their patterns, knew exactly when the gaps in their surveillance would appear. I'd been planning this for weeks, waiting for the right moment. The bar was dark, lit only by the glow of various alien drinks and the occasional flicker of a broken neon sign. The patrons were mostly human, with a few other species mixed in. They looked at me when I came in, but they didn't say anything. They knew the drill. In a place like this, you didn't ask questions. You just listened. I sat down at the bar and ordered a drink. I didn't know what it was, didn't care. I just needed to look like I belonged. The bartender, a grizzled human with a scar across his face, slid a glass in front of me. "You're the one from Kepler-47c, he said. It wasn't a question. "How did you know?" He shrugged. "Word travels fast in the lower levels. You're the human who survived the black ship." I froze. "How do you know about the black ship?" "I know a lot of things." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I know that this isn't the first time it's appeared. I know that it's been appearing for hundreds of years on the edges of imperial space. I know that the Empire has been covering it up." My heart was racing. Hundreds of years. "They call it the black ship," he said. "Or the void vessel. Depends on who you talk to. But it's been showing up on the edges of space for as long as the Empire has existed. And every time it appears, something bad happens." I didn't know what to say. I was still processing everything, still trying to make sense of it all. "The Empire has been trying to hide it," the bartender continued. "They don't want people to know that there's something out there that they can't control, but the stories keep coming. The legends keep spreading." "How many attacks have there been?" He shook his head. "I don't know. Dozens, maybe hundreds. But the Empire covers them up, blames them on mining accidents, solar flares, anything to explain away the destruction." I thought about the girl I'd saved on Kepler-47c. I wondered what had happened to her. I hoped she'd made it out okay. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because someone has to." The bartender looked me straight in the eye. "You survived and the ship spoke to you. That makes you special. That makes you important. You have a duty to tell people what's really happening. I stared into my drink, watching the bubbles rise. I don't know if I can. The Empire has me locked up. They're watching me. Then escape, he said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. Leave the capital. Go to the edges of space where the Empire's reach is weaker. Find others who have seen the ship. Build a network. The Empire can't control everything. I looked at him, really looked at him. He was just a bartender, a washed-up old human with a scarred face and tired eyes. But there was something in his gaze, something that told me he'd seen more than he was letting on. "Who are you?" I asked. He smiled, a sad smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Someone who's been waiting for you to show up." That night was the first time I met anyone from the Resistance. The Resistance. They called themselves that, though I'm not sure what they were resisting exactly. The Empire, the Black Ship, the forces of the universe that were trying to destroy us. It was all a mystery. But they helped me escape the capital. They gave me a new identity, a new face, a new purpose. They sent me to the edge of human space, to a small colony called Haven, where I could start to build the network that the bartender had talked about. Haven was a frozen world, covered in ice and snow. The only heat came from the geothermal vents that dotted the surface. The colony was small, maybe 5,000 people, all human. They were the kind of people who'd chosen to live on the edge of the galaxy, far from the Empire's control. They welcomed me with open arms. They'd heard the legends too, had seen the Black Ship's shadow on their own skis. Some of them had lost family to the attacks. Some of them were still searching for answers. And together, we started to piece together the truth. The truth was terrifying. The Black Ship wasn't just a ship. It was a vessel of something much larger, much older. The bartender had called it the Void Vessel, and that name was more accurate than he'd realized. The ship was a messenger, a herald, a warning. And its message was simple. We were not alone. We were not special. We were not the only intelligent life in the universe. But there were other things out there. Things much older than the Empire, much older than the human race. Things that had been sleeping for eons, waiting to wake up. The Black Ship was the herald of their awakening. And the darkness that had swallowed the sky on Kepler 47c was just the beginning. For months we worked in secret. We gathered information, pieced together fragments of old legends, connected with other survivors. The network grew slowly, like a snowball rolling down a hill. At first, it was just me and a few other survivors. Then it was a dozen, then 100. We called ourselves the Void Watchers. It wasn't a particularly original name, but it worked. We watched the edges of space, looking for signs of the Black Ship's return. We knew it was coming. We knew it would appear again, somewhere, and when it did, we'd be there to witness it. The Empire, of course, tried to stop us. They saw us as a threat, a conspiracy that needed to be crushed. They sent soldiers to Haven, raided our bases, arrested our members, but they couldn't destroy us. We were too spread out, too scattered. We'd learned to live in the shadows, to move unseen through the cracks of the Empire's vast machine. And then, almost a year after Kepler 47c, the Black Ship appeared again. Part 3, the second appearance. The message came through our encrypted network, a single line of text: "It's back." I was in a small outpost on a frozen moon, helping to set up a new observation post. The moon was called Tethys, and it was so far from the Empire's core that we didn't even bother with a proper name. It was just a lump of ice and rock, spinning around a gas giant that had no breathable atmosphere. But it was perfect for our purposes. It was dark, remote, and had an unobstructed view of a large swath of space. The message came in the middle of the night. I was half asleep in my quarters, wrapped in blankets to fight off the cold, when my comm unit buzzed. I stumbled to the console, my fingers numb from the cold. The message was from a contact in the Orion sector, a human named Maria who'd been tracking the ship for months. "It's back," she said. "In the Orion sector. A small colony, nothing important, but it's there. I'm sending you the coordinates." I looked at the display, at the coordinates that Maria had transmitted. The colony was called New Hope, a farming settlement of about 2,000 people. It was exactly the kind of place the black ship seemed to target. Remote, isolated, far from the Empire's watchful eyes. "I'll be there," I said. "Just give me a few hours." I packed my gear and headed for the landing pad, where my ship was waiting. It wasn't much of a ship, just a small cargo hauler that had seen better days. But it was fast, and it could make the jump to lightspeed without the fancy equipment that the Empire used. As I lifted off the moon's surface, I had a moment of doubt. What was I doing? I was just a logistics officer, a paper pusher. I had no training for this. I was going to fly to the edge of the galaxy, to a colony that was probably already destroyed, to see a ship that had driven me half mad the first time I'd seen it. But I had to go. I had to see it again, had to understand what it was and what it wanted. The voice in my head had called me the messenger, and I had to deliver the message, even if I didn't know what it meant. The journey to New Hope took 3 days. 3 days of staring at the stars, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. When I arrived, I knew immediately that something was wrong. The colony's landing pad was empty, the fields around it abandoned. There was no sign of the black ship, no sign of destruction, just silence. I landed the ship and stepped out into the thin atmosphere. The air smelled like dust and something else, something metallic that I couldn't identify. There was a body on the ground. I walked over to it, my heart pounding. It was a human, a farmer by the look of his clothes. He was dead, but there was no wound, no sign of violence. He just looked like he'd fallen asleep and never woken up. I checked his pulse. Nothing. I checked his eyes. They were open, staring at the sky, but there was no life in them. "What happened here?" I whispered. I walked into the colony proper, past abandoned houses and empty streets. There were bodies everywhere, all of them the same. No wounds, no signs of struggle. They just died, every single one of them, as if something had simply turned off their life. And then I saw the black ship. It was hovering at the edge of the colony, its black surface blending into the dark sky. It was smaller than the one on Kepler 47c, or maybe it was just farther away. But it was the same shape, the same texture, the same wrongness. It was waiting for me. I knew it. The moment I saw it, I knew that it had been waiting for me to arrive. I walked toward it. I don't know why. It was like something was pulling me, some invisible force that I couldn't resist. The ship pulsed with crimson light just like before, and then the voice returned. "You have come." "I don't know why," I said. "I don't understand what you want from me." "You are the messenger. You are the one who will carry the truth." "What truth? What are you trying to tell me?" The ship pulsed again, and I felt something shift in my mind. Images flooded my consciousness, images that I couldn't process. Stars burning, worlds dying, something massive and terrible waking from a long sleep. The Empire is not the end. It is just the beginning. Something older is coming, something that will consume everything. "The darkness," I said. "You're talking about the darkness." "The darkness is not the enemy. The darkness is the answer. The Empire has grown fat and complacent. It believes it is the only power in the universe. It must be shown the truth." "What truth?" "That there are things in the void that are much older and much stronger. They are waking. And when they wake, everything will change." The ship pulsed one more time, and then it was gone. Just like that. The sky was empty, and I was standing in the middle of a dead colony, surrounded by bodies that would never wake up. I didn't know what to do. I was overwhelmed, confused, terrified. The ship had spoken to me again, had shown me things that I couldn't understand. But one thing was clear. It was trying to warn us. It was trying to tell us that something terrible was coming. I walked back to my ship, my legs shaking. I sat in the pilot's seat and stared out at the dark sky. And then I started to cry. I cried for the dead colonists, for the lost lives, for the future that suddenly seemed so uncertain. I cried because I was the messenger, and I had no idea how to deliver the message. The survivors of New Hope were few, a handful of people who'd been off-world when the ship arrived. They'd returned to find their homes destroyed, their families dead. I gathered them together in the colony's main hall, the only building that was still standing. There were maybe 20 of them, all human, all in shock. "I'm sorry," I said. "I know this is hard, but I need to tell you what I saw. I need to tell you what the ship told me." They listened as I explained everything, the voice, the images, the warning. I told them about the darkness, about the things waking in the void, about the Empire's complacency. When I finished, there was silence. Then a woman stood up. She was in her 30s, her face streaked with tears. "What do we do?" she asked. "How do we fight something like that?" I didn't have an answer. I still didn't. But I knew that we couldn't give up. We couldn't just let the Empire continue with its denial. We had to spread the message, had to make sure that everyone knew the truth. "We fight," I said. "We tell people what's happening. We force the Empire to acknowledge the threat, and we prepare." "Prepare for what?" "For the darkness," I said. "For whatever's coming, because it's coming whether we like it or not. And if we're not ready, we're all going to die." Part 4. The resistance grows. The next few months were a blur of activity. The network grew rapidly. More survivors, more witnesses, more people who'd seen the black ship and survived. We started to piece together a pattern, to understand where the ship was likely to appear next. It seemed to favor remote colonies, settlements that were on the edge of the Empire's reach, places where the population was mostly human, where the Empire's oversight was minimal. "Why humans?" I asked. "Why always human colonies?" I was in a meeting with some of the network's leaders, trying to figure out our next move. The meeting was being held on a space station called Aurora, a free port that wasn't officially part of the Empire. "Because we're expendable," one of them said. She was a woman named Kira, a former Imperial officer who defected after seeing the ship herself. "We're the ones who do the dirty work. We're the ones who live on the edges. It makes sense that the ship would target us." "But why? What does it want from us?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I think it's trying to get our attention. The Empire won't listen, so it's coming to us directly." I thought about the voice, the images, the message. It made sense in a twisted kind of way. The ship was trying to warn us, to prepare us for something. But what? The answer came a few weeks later, when we intercepted an Imperial transmission. The transmission was classified, top secret. It had been sent from the Empire's core to all military installations across the galaxy. It was a warning. The Empire had finally acknowledged the black ship, not publicly, of course. They wouldn't admit to the galaxy that they'd been hiding the truth, but internally they were scrambling. The message described the ship, its behavior, its attacks. It warned that the ship was not a natural phenomenon, that it was actively hostile, that it posed a threat to the Empire itself. I read the transmission with a mix of triumph and despair. Triumph, because the Empire was finally taking the threat seriously. Despair, because they still didn't understand what they were dealing with. "This is just the beginning," I said to Kira. "They don't realize it, but this is just the beginning." "Of what?" "Of the end," I said. "The ship isn't the enemy, it's just a messenger. The real enemy is still sleeping, waiting to wake up, and when it does, the Empire won't be able to stop it." Kira looked at me, her eyes wide. "How do you know that?" "Because the ship showed me," I said. "It showed me everything." I started to have dreams after that. Vivid, terrifying dreams that felt more like memories. I saw the black ship appearing in the skies of other worlds, raining destruction down on innocent people. I saw the Empire's soldiers fighting bravely, dying in droves. I saw the darkness spreading, swallowing everything in its path. But I also saw something else. I saw humans standing together, fighting against the darkness. I saw us overcoming our differences, uniting against a common enemy. I saw the Empire acknowledging us, not as a conquered species, but as equals. It was a beautiful vision, but it was also terrifying because I knew that it was a vision of the future, a future that might never come to pass if we didn't do everything we could to make it happen. I woke up one night, drenched in sweat, and I knew what I had to do. I had to go to the Empire. I had to make them listen. The journey to the capital took weeks. I traveled through jump gates, avoided patrols, and finally arrived at the gleaming planet that was the seat of the Empire's power. It had changed since I'd been there last. The streets were filled with soldiers, the air tense with fear. The Empire had mobilized its forces, preparing for war, but they still didn't understand the true nature of the enemy. I found the same bar I'd visited before, the Lost Cause. The bartender was still there, his scarred face unchanged. "You're back," he said. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "I need to see them," I said. "The Imperial Council, I need to talk to them." He laughed a harsh sound. "You think they'll listen to you? You're just a human." "No," I said. "I'm the messenger, and they need to hear what I have to say." He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching my face. Finally, he nodded. "I'll make some calls," he said, "but I can't promise anything." I waited in the bar for 3 days. I drank bad alien beer and watched the news reports, which were full of propaganda about the Empire's military strength and the threat of the unknown aggressor. On the 3rd night, a pair of Imperial soldiers came to the bar. They were tall, gray-skinned creatures with features that were almost human. They looked at me with cold eyes. "You're the human," one of them said, "the one who survived." "Yes. Come with us. The council wants to see you." The Imperial Council chamber was a huge space, filled with representatives from 100 different species. They all turned to look at me as I entered, their faces a mixture of curiosity and contempt. I walked to the center of the room, where a small platform had been set up. I stood on it, facing the council. "You have been summoned," the Grand Chancellor said. He was a Viartan with 3 eyes that stared at me impassively. "You claim to have knowledge of the ship. Speak." I told them everything. I told them about the voice, the message, the images I'd seen. I told them about the darkness, about the things waking in the void, about the Empire's complacency. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then the Chancellor spoke. "This is madness," he said. "You're telling us that the ship is a messenger, that there's something else out there, something worse." "Yes. And you expect us to believe you. You're just a human, a conquered species. Your mind is fragile, your perception's unreliable. This could all be a delusion." "I know what I saw," I said. "I know what I heard. And I know that if we don't prepare, if we don't unite, we're all going to die." The Chancellor laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. "Human," he said, "you are nothing. Your species is nothing. The Empire has survived for millennia, has overcome countless threats. We will overcome this one too. We don't need your help." I felt a surge of anger. "You're making a mistake. The darkness isn't like anything you've faced before. It's ancient, powerful, and it's been waiting for a long time. The black ship is just the first wave. The real threat is still coming, and if we don't prepare, if we don't unite, we'll be annihilated." "Enough," the Chancellor said. "Your testimony has been noted, but we will not be swayed by the ravings of a delusional human. Guards, take him away." The soldiers moved toward me. I didn't resist. I knew that it was hopeless, that I couldn't convince them with words alone. But I also knew that I wasn't done. I had a network, a movement, a cause, and I would continue to fight no matter what the Empire said. Part 5: The Gathering Storm. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. The Empire had declared me an enemy of the state. My image was plastered across the galaxy, my name a synonym for treason and madness. I was hunted, pursued, forced to flee from world to world, always one step ahead of the Imperial forces. But I wasn't alone. The network had grown, had become something more than just a small group of survivors. It was now a movement, a resistance, a rebellion. We called ourselves the Dawn Collective. It was a name that represented hope, the idea that the darkness wasn't the end, but the beginning of something new. We had bases on dozens of worlds, hidden in the shadows of the Empire's reach. We had ships, weapons, resources. We had people, thousands of people from all species, all united by a single purpose. And we had the truth. The Empire might deny it, but we knew what was coming, and we were preparing. The first sign that the darkness was coming came from the edge of the galaxy. It was a place called the Veil, a region of space that was shrouded in a massive nebula. The nebula had always been there, a beautiful tapestry of colors that had been studied by scientists for centuries. But now it was changing. The colors were fading, replaced by an inky blackness. The veil was becoming something else, something darker. We sent a scout ship to investigate. It never returned. But before it went silent, it transmitted a single image, a massive shape moving through the darkness. It was too large to be a ship, too large to be anything we'd ever seen. It was a presence, a force, a thing of pure shadow. The darkness had arrived. I was on a world called Elysium, one of our main bases, when the news came. Elysium was a tropical paradise, covered in jungles and oceans, a stark contrast to the frozen worlds I'd spent so much time on. I was in the command center, going over reports when Kira burst in. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "It's happening," she said. "The darkness, it's spreading." I looked at the display she'd brought up. It showed the veil, or what had once been the veil. Now it was just a void, a massive expanse of nothingness that was expanding outward, consuming everything in its path. "How fast?" I asked. "Faster than anything we've seen," she said. "It's eating the stars, consuming entire solar systems. The Empire is trying to stop it, but they can't. They don't know how." I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. I'd known this was coming, had been preparing for it for years. But now that it was here, I realized that I wasn't ready. None of us were. "What do we do?" Kira asked. I thought about it. We had ships, weapons, resources. But none of that would matter against a force that could consume stars. "We need the Empire," I said. "We can't fight this alone. We need to unite, to work together." "The Empire hates us," Kira said. "They'll never listen." "Then we make them listen," I said. "We show them the truth, whether they want to see it or not." We launched a massive offensive against the Empire's forces. It wasn't a conventional attack, not in the way they would have expected. We didn't target their military installations or their population centers. Instead, we targeted their communications networks. We hijacked their broadcasts, overrode their news feeds, filled their screens with images of the darkness. We showed them what was happening at the edge of the galaxy, showed them the truth that they'd been trying so hard to hide. The Empire fought back, of course. They tried to shut us down, to silence our voices, but we were too many, too spread out. Every time they suppressed one broadcast, another one appeared. Soon, the entire galaxy was watching. They saw the darkness consuming stars, saw the black ship appearing on distant worlds, saw the truth that the Empire had been hiding. And they panicked. Riots broke out across the Empire's core worlds. People took to the streets, demanding answers, demanding action. The Empire was overwhelmed, unable to control the chaos. And in the middle of it all, I saw an opportunity. I went back to the capital. I traveled alone, without fanfare, without any of the trappings of the rebellion. I walked into the Imperial Council chamber, past the guards who didn't even try to stop me, and stood before the council. The Grand Chancellor was still there, his 3 eyes blinking in confusion. "You again," he said, "the human, the rebel." "Yes," I said, "and I've come to ask for your help." He laughed, a hollow sound. "Help? You expect us to help you? You've turned the galaxy against us." "I've told the truth," I said. "The darkness is coming. It's consuming everything in its path, and the Empire can't stop it. We can't stop it, not alone." "So you want us to ally with you," he said, "to join forces with a band of rebels?" "Yes." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice low. "What do you propose?" The alliance was fragile, barely held together by fear and necessity. But it was a start. The Empire provided its military might, its vast resources, its knowledge of the galaxy. The Dawn Collective provided its network, its spies, its understanding of the darkness. We established a joint command, a unified force that was tasked with holding back the darkness. We built defensive lines, fortified worlds, prepared for the inevitable attack. And all the while, we tried to understand what we were facing. The darkness wasn't just a physical threat. It was something else, something that seemed to feed on fear and despair. We saw it in the eyes of our soldiers, the way they'd lose hope, lose the will to fight. We saw it in the way the darkness spread, not just through space, but through the minds of everyone it touched. But we also saw something else. We saw humans standing at the forefront of the fight, fighting with a courage and determination that surprised everyone. We were the ones who'd seen the ship, who'd heard its message. We were the ones who'd been preparing for this for years. And when the Empire faltered, we were the ones who stepped up to take the lead. "Humans," the Chancellor said, his voice thick with grudging respect, "I underestimated you." "Everyone does," I said, "but we're still here." Part 6, the final stand. The battle for the galaxy was fought on 1,000 fronts. I was on the bridge of the flagship, a massive vessel that had been hastily assembled from the wreckage of the Empire's fleet. It was a patchwork thing, all mismatched parts and jury-rigged systems, but it was fast and it was powerful. And it was filled with humans. The Empire had given us command of the forward fleets, recognizing that we understood the darkness better than any other species. "We've detected a massive energy signature," Kira said, reading from her console. "It's coming directly toward us." "Show me," I said. The display flickered, showing the dark void that was expanding toward us, and in the center of it, a massive shape. It was the black ship, but it was different. Bigger, more ominous, covered in those shifting patterns. And it was radiating an energy so powerful that I could feel it even through the ship's bulkheads. "It's just one ship," someone said. "We can take it." "No," I said. "It's not just one ship, it's a messenger. It's here to deliver a message." "From who?" "From them," I said, pointing to the darkness. "From the things that are waiting in the void." The ship pulsed with crimson light, and I felt the voice in my head again. "You have come. You have brought the Empire's forces." "I have," I said, "and I'm going to stop you." "You cannot stop what is coming. You can only prepare." "Then we're prepared," I said. "We've been preparing for years. We're ready." The ship pulsed again, and I felt a wave of emotion that wasn't my own. Pride, respect, something that might have been awe. "Then it is time." The black ship began to change. It expanded, grew, became something else. The darkness around it receded, and I saw what was inside. It was a fleet. Thousands of ships, emerging from the void, all the same black color, all covered in the same shifting patterns. They spread out across the darkness, forming a massive armada that stretched from one end of the void to the other. "This is it," I said. "This is what we've been preparing for." Kira looked at me, her eyes wide. "There are thousands of them. How can we fight that?" "We don't," I said. "We don't fight them, we talk to them." "Talk to them? They're an enemy fleet. They're here to destroy us." "No," I said. "The black ship was never the enemy. It was a messenger, These ships, they're not here to fight, they're here to join us. I stepped away from the console and walked to the front of the bridge. I faced the darkness, faced the fleet that had emerged from it. This is the beginning, I said. The beginning of something new. The Empire, the humans, all the species of the galaxy united against the darkness. We're not just fighting for survival, we're fighting for a future. I turned to look at Kira. Open a channel to the fleet, I said. All frequencies. She nodded, her fingers flying across the console. I spoke into the void. My name is Ethan, I said. I'm the messenger, and I'm here to tell you that it's time for the truth to finally be heard. The Empire is not your enemy. Humanity is not your enemy. The enemy is the darkness that has been consuming the galaxy for eons. It's time to stand together. It's time to unite. The response came immediately. The entire fleet pulsed with crimson light, a wave that spread across the darkness like ripples in water. Then from the heart of the void, a voice spoke. Well spoken, human. I felt the presence. The force that had been sleeping in the void. It was vast, unimaginably old, and it was stirring. The darkness is not the enemy. The darkness is the answer. The Empire has grown fat and complacent. It believes it is the only power in the universe. It must be shown the truth. Show us, I said, show us the truth. The voice paused, then it continued. The truth is that the universe is much older and much stranger than you realize. The black ship is not the messenger. It is the key. The key to what? The key to the void, the key to the darkness, the key to everything. And then the black ship turned, its surface changing, revealing a doorway that hadn't been there before. The darkness began to recede, but something was coming through. Something massive, something that defied all logic, all understanding. Ethan, what's happening? Kira said, her voice shaking. I don't know, I said, but I think we're about to find out. The shape emerged from the void, revealing itself to be a massive structure, a ring of black material that was covered in the same shifting patterns as the ship. By the gods, someone whispered, it's a gate. And beyond the gate I could see something else, a universe of light, of stars, of possibilities. The void had been hiding a door, a gateway to something else. And that something else was waiting for us to step through. I think, I said, my voice barely a whisper, that we just found our future. The end of the beginning.